Hello, and thanks for joining me here for another episode of Storytime. Today, I'd like to share with you one of my really short stories. I think it comes in at right under 500 words, and it was recently published in Down in the Dirt. So there will, in the show notes, there will be a link to the story. But since it is such a short story, I'm going to read it in full instead of just giving you an excerpt. The story is called Still. Still, he thought, staring unseeingly out of his office window. She could have called. She could have let him know where she was, that she was okay, that she'd be home later. They said her condition would stabilize, his words spoken aloud, although there was no one to hear them. They said sometimes it takes a while for the drugs to work. They said, but there he stopped because he wasn't sure what they had really said and what he thought they had said and what he wanted them to say, but perhaps they couldn't. Still, time and again, he had told her that no matter what, he would be there for her. I promise, just last night when they were washing up the dinner dishes, I promise you won't be alone. I'll be with you every step of the way, right there with you. He remembered the look she gave him, sad and pitying and just a little angry, as though she was thinking that he was making a vow that he couldn't possibly keep. And she knew it, and he should know it too. Tell me, he had begged in frustration, trying to wipe away that expression from her face. Just tell me what you need and what I can do. I'll do anything at all. Just ask. Die for me, she murmured, and then she walked away, heading to the living room where she had taken to sleeping instead of curled next to him in the bed. He wiped the last glass, set it on the shelf, and hung the towel to dry. Later, when he glanced in before going to bed, her back was to the room, to him. And the next morning, when he came in to make coffee, she was already gone. 20 miles out of town, she stood on the embankment, shivering a bit in the chill autumn air. She watched the geese settle for a brief rest on the lake before they traveled to a warmer, more hospitable climate. Last night's conversation, well, not really a conversation since she had only said that one sentence, played in her mind. I'll do anything, he had said, and maybe he meant it, but it was easy to make promises when no one would ever know that you failed. And did it matter in the end? Did anything matter? There was nothing they could do. They knew that. She knew that. And she was tired of the pain, of waiting for the inevitable, of trying to be hopeful when there was nothing left to hope for. She wasn't like him. He wasn't ready to give up. Even after all the results were in, he had hope, still. The geese, disturbed by the unexpected sound, took flight. Then, after a few minutes, the lake was once again calm and serene. Not a ripple to betray what had transpired. The surface still as night, still as the grave, still. So, where this story came from, not from any personal experience. Actually, it started out as a technical challenge I had set myself. I wanted to write a story that used a word, the repetition of a word, but a word that could take multiple forms, adverb, adjective, noun, verb, whatever. So I did some hunting to see what word can I possibly come up with. This is not usually the way I write. Usually I start out with dialogue, but in this instance, every now and then I like to challenge myself as a writer. So I settled on the word still, something about the word. And when I picked the word still, the first image that came to my mind was actually of a lake, the way it looks before it's disturbed, before someone throws something into it. And then afterward, after the ripples slowly fade away, how the lake looks then. Again, very still. And from there, that's where the story ended up. You know, an odd story, hardly what one would refer to as a cheery, upbeat story, but it was the story that I ended up writing. You know, sometimes I think we don't always have control over what we write. We write what needs to be written at any point in time. So, as you can imagine, although flash fiction tends to be, there's a good market for them, there's not that many markets for stories quite like this. So I had submitted it a few places and was very fortunate when Down in the Dirt accepted it and published it. So it was a good experience for me, but it was interesting. Some of the feedback I got from people who knew me. Okay, it wasn't from readers, it was more from people that I said, hey, check out my story. It's on Down in the Dirt. And they would read it and then they would call me and say, are you okay? Is there something wrong? Do you need to talk about something? And it's like, no, this isn't about anything I'm dealing with or whatever. This is just the story that came to me. And I mean, it's kind of nice to know people worry about you, but at the same time, there's a certain amount of guilt thinking, God, didn't want to do this to other people. But anyways, that is how the story came about. Again, like I said, I simply set out for a technical challenge. It could have easily been a completely different story if another word would have popped into my mind that could have served multiple purposes from a grammatical standpoint. But in this case, it was the word still, and it was the story that needed to be written, that wanted to be written, and at the right time, that is where it turned out. So that is my story. If you like the story, if you were intrigued by the story, do let me know. And thank you so much for joining me here for another episode of Storytime.